Chapter 1. The Cruel Gift. The saloon doors banged open with a rattle of hinges, and laughter spilled into the cold night. Lantern lights swung in crooked circles, casting long shadows across the muddy street of Sage Hollow. A half-dozen cowhands stumbled out, half-drunk, spurs jingling in time with their cruel amusement. Between them, slumped over the side of a wagon, was a woman, pale, stiff, her hair tangled in the dusty wind. "Yep, Silas," one of them hollered, his voice sharp with mockery. "We brung your wife. Thought you might be lonely up there in them hills." From the edge of the timberline, a tall figure stepped into view. Silas Boone, the mountain man folks called half-wild himself, came down the slope slow and steady. His broad shoulders caught the last smear of sunset, and his rifle rested easy in one hand. He didn't speak. Didn't have to. Silence itself seemed to follow him, heavy as the weight of the Rockies behind his back. The men roared louder when they saw his face, scarred and weather-worn. "Ain't she a prize?" Another sneered, giving the wagon wheel a shove so the woman jolted forward. She gritted her teeth but made no sound, her legs refusing to move when they tried to push her down. Silas's jaw worked once. Then he laid the rifle against the post and strode over, boots sinking in the mud. Without a word, he bent and lifted her as though she weighed no more than a child. Her shawl slipped back, revealing clenched hands and the stark shame burning in her eyes. She turned her face away, cheeks hot under the lamplight. The laughter rolled like thunder. Look at him, taking pity on a broken doll. Silas shifted her gently in his arms, then raised his gaze to the men. The lantern glow caught the steel in his eyes. Cold, unblinking, a warning carved deeper than words. One by one, the jeers faltered, boots shuffle on the boards, spurs clinking softer. The coyotes howl from the ridge, and the men suddenly seemed eager for their bottles and card games again. "Hell with you, then," the leader spat, but his voice had lost its edge. They stumbled back into the saloon, the creak of swinging doors drowning their retreat. For a moment, only the night wind moved, dry sage on the breeze, the far-off rattle of cattle bells. Silas lowered his head to the woman in his arms. "You safe now," he said, the words low and rough, like stones rolling down a creek. Her throat tightened. No one had said such a thing to her in years. She wanted to believe him, but shame burned hotter than the lantern light, fading behind them. He didn't press her, just carried her up the trail, steady as a mountain, his boots crunching gravel in time with her racing heart. And for the first time since she'd been cast aside as a joke, Clara wondered if maybe fate had not finished with her yet. Chapter 2. Ashes of Pride. The cabin smelled of pine smoke and strong coffee, a scent that clung to the rough-hewn logs and the heavy bearskin rug spread across the floor. Clara lay stiff on the narrow bed against the wall, watching the mountain man move about his home with quiet purpose. He stoked the fire, the orange glow flickering over his scarred face, then set a tin mug on the table within reach of her hand. "Drink," Silas said, his voice low, gravelly as the trails he walked. Clara's chin lifted, her pride bristling sharper than any thorn. "I don't need you waiting on me like some helpless child," she snapped. Her hands trembled as she tried to push herself upright, her legs refusing to obey. The frustration coiled hot inside her chest, sharpened the pain that haunted her spine. Silas didn't answer. He simply pulled a chair closer and sat, elbows resting on his knees. His silence was worse than pity. It gave her nothing to fight against. She seized the mug anyway, fingers curling hard around the handle. The bitter heat of the coffee stung her tongue, but she drank deeply, if only to prove she could. Outside, the wind pressed against the shutters, carrying with it the lonely cry of a coyote. The mountains stood cold and eternal beyond the small window, their snowy peaks painted gold by the setting sun. It should have been beautiful. To Clara, it was a prison. You should have left me, she whispered finally, her voice breaking like thin glass. They gave me to you as a joke. You know that. I'm no use to a man like you. Silas leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. For a long moment, he studied her, not her twisted legs or the shame burning in her eyes, but her, a woman fighting hard not to break. Use, he said at last, shaking his head. World measures people wrong. They see weakness where I see grit. He stood, his broad frame filling the cabin doorway as he looked out into the fading light. Let him laugh. Don't change a thing for me. Clara swallowed hard, her throat thick. No one had ever spoken to her like that, as if her worth wasn't tied to what she could or couldn't do. But instead of softening, her pride pushed back. You don't know me, she said, though her voice wavered. Silas turned, eyes steady, calm as still water. Not yet. The fire popped, a shower of sparks rising into the chimney. For the first time in years, Clara felt something stir within her. Not hope, not yet, but the faintest ember of it. She turned away quickly, blinking hard at the log walls. She would not let him see her cry. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Dark. The night was sharp and clear, the kind where the stars burned like silver nails hammered into a sheet of black velvet. Coyotes called from the ridges, their voices echoing down into the valley like mournful church bells. Clara shivered on the cabin bed, staring at the rough log ceiling, listening to Silas move about outside. Every board creak and every clang of his boots against the porch told her he was near, a presence both comforting and confusing. When the door opened, the cool night air rolled in with him, carrying the scent of pine and smoke. Without a word, Silas crossed the room and bent to lift her. Clara stiffened, her pride flaring even though her body betrayed her. I can stay inside, she muttered, her voice defensive, as if daring him to argue. Silas didn't. He simply wrapped her in a blanket and carried her outside. The fire pit still glowed, embers painting his jawline red, as he lowered her onto a chair he'd built from raw timber. She sat rigid, clutching the blanket close. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the crackle wood and the distant rush of the river. Finally, Clara exhaled, a shaky sound she couldn't quite control. They left me with you because I'm nothing, she said quietly, staring at the flames. A burden, a joke, that's all I've ever been. Silas crouched by the fire, his rough hand steady as he fed in another log. The sparks flared upward, lighting his scarred face. You believe their words too easy, he said, voice low, like gravel rolled in a stream. Her throat tightened. What else am I supposed to believe? She turned her face to the stars, blinking fast against the tears she didn't want him to see. I can't walk, can't dance, can't give a man the things a woman should. Silas rose then, his shadow stretching tall against the firelight. He moved closer, slow as a mountain storm, until his presence wrapped around her. His gaze met hers, unflinching. I don't want to dance, he said. Don't want fine words nor pretty dresses. I want truth, and you got more of that in your eyes than all them fools in town. Clara's breath caught. No one had ever looked at her that way, not past the brokenness, not past the shame. Her heart thudded hard, too loud in her ears, but fear coiled just as fiercely. She looked away, clutching the blanket tighter. You don't know what you're saying, she whispered. Maybe not, Silas admitted, settling down on the ground beside her chair, arms resting easy on his knees. But I know this, you ain't nothing. The fire snapped, a shower of sparks racing upward toward the endless wild west sky. Clara bit her lip, torn between pride and longing, fear and the strange warmth blooming in her chest. For the first time in years, the night didn't feel empty. Chapter 4. A gun at the door. The night had gone still, too still. Even the coyotes that usually howl from the ridges seemed to have slunk off into silence. Clara sat near the hearth, the firelight soft against her pale face, while Silas carved a strip of wood with slow, even strokes. The only sound was the rasp of his knife and the whisper of the wind through the chinks in the cabin walls. Then came the crunch of hooves in the snow-crusted dirt, low laughter, the unmistakable clink of spurs. Clara's fingers gripped the blanket around her shoulders. She knew those voices, the men from Sage Hollow. Her stomach knotted. A heavy fist pounded against the door. "Boone!" A drunken voice called, mocking. "How's the cripple treating you? Tame her yet?" Silas rose in one smooth motion, the knife sliding back into its sheath. He set the carve aside, crossed the room, and pulled his shotgun from the wall. The metal glinted in the firelight as he checked the chamber with practiced ease. Clara's breath caught. "Silas," she whispered, "don't." But he was already moving, boots thudding against the plank floor. He opened the door with a slow, deliberate pull. The wind swept in, carrying the smell of whiskey and sweat. 4 men stood in the yard, their faces red with drink, grins twisted with cruelty. One carried a bottle, another a pistol tucked loose in his belt. The leader, a wiry man with scar down his jaw, spat into the dirt. "Come to see if she's keeping you warm," he sneered. The others laughed, cruel and sharp in the cold night. Silas stepped into the doorway, shotgun balanced in his hands, the barrels black and unblinking. He didn't shout, didn't bluster. His voice came low, steady as the mountains behind him. "You'll turn round and ride back to town," he said. "Now." The men shifted uneasily, glancing at one another. The leader snorted, trying to puff himself tall. "Or what? You're going to shoot over a useless woman." The word useless cut through Clara like a knife. But before she could flinch, Silas's voice rumbled again. "Say that again," he warned, eyes narrowing. The leader smirked and reached for his pistol. The world seemed to freeze. Clara gasped, her body stiffening in the chair. Then the night cracked open with thunder. Silas fired first. The blast lit the yard in a white flash, scattering the men backward. One yelped, clutching his arm as his pistol clattered into the dirt. The others cursed, scrambling to drag him toward the horses. "You're mad!" one shouted, pale now beneath his drunken haze. Silas stepped forward, shotgun still raised. "Next time I don't aim wide." They didn't wait to test him. Mounting up in a clatter of hooves and curses, they fled down the trail, swallowed by the darkness. Silas lowered the gun, breast steady despite the storm that had just passed. When he turned back inside, Clara's eyes were wide, her hands pressed tight to her lips. "You!" Her voice shook. "You could have been killed." Silas set the shotgun against the wall, his gaze steady on her. "Not while they're trying to take what's mine." The words settled heavy in the cabin. For the first time, Clara didn't feel like a burden. She felt claimed, protected, worth fighting for. And that frightened her more than the guns. Chapter 5. The Strength Within. Morning sunlight poured through the small cabin window, spilling across the plank floor in golden stripes. The smell of coffee lingered, mingling with pine smoke from the hearth. Clara sat at the table, her hands folded in her lap, watching Silas move about the cabin. He was sharpening an axe, each stroke measured and calm, as though the night's gunfight hadn't happened at all. Clara's thoughts, though, had not settled so easily. The echo of gunfire still clung to her bones. She had seen men fight before, but never for her. The memory of Silas standing in the doorway, steady as a mountain, refusing to let anyone touch her, it filled her chest with a heat that was both frightening and new. She broke the silence first. "You risked your life," she murmured. Silas didn't look up from the axe. "That's what a man does." She swallowed, For a woman who can't even stand on her own 2 feet, that made him pause. He lifted his eyes to her, blue-gray and steady. For a woman worth it. Clara turned her face away quickly, blinking against the sting in her eyes. She hated the tears. They always made her feel small, weak. But something in his voice had shifted the ground beneath her pride. Later, when Silas went out to chop wood, Clara turned her gaze to the cabin. It was plain and spare, built for survival, not comfort. A threadbare curtain hung at the window, and the bedding lay in a heap from where Silas had carried her the night before. Her fingers itched to be useful. She dragged the pile closer, smoothing the blanket, folding shirts with care. When she found his shirts torn from years of work, she reached for a needle and thread from the small tin on the shelf. The work was slow, her hands clumsy, but each stitch steadied her heart. When Silas returned, arms full of split logs, he stopped short in the doorway. His scarred face softened as he looked around. The bed was made, his shirts patched, and Clara sat by the fire with a mending in her lap. "You've been busy," he said. Clara kept her eyes on the fabric. "I can't chop wood, can't ride a horse, but I can do this." Her voice trembled, but there was steel beneath it. "I won't just sit here while you do everything." For a long moment, Silas stood silent, the logs heavy in his arms. Then he set them down and crouched beside her. His hand, rough and scarred, brushed the edge of the mended shirt. "You've done more in this cabin today than I have in a week," he said softly. Her lips parted, a protest ready. But it died when she saw the truth in his eyes. Not pity, not mockery. Respect. The firelight flickered between them, warm against the cabin's shadows. For the first time since she'd been left on his doorstep, Clara felt something stir deeper than survival. She was no one's burden. She was part of something now, part of him. Chapter 6, Beauty in the Wild. The first light of dawn crept over the mountains, brushing the peaks with gold and setting the sky ablaze in hues of rose and amber. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of sagebrush in the distant hush of the river below. Silas stepped out of the cabin with Clara in his arms, her blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders. She had argued at first, said she didn't want him wasting strength hauling her up the ridge. But he'd only given her that quiet look of his, the one that made arguing seem like foolishness. Now, as the world opened wide before them, Clara fell silent. They reached the ridge as the sun crested the horizon. The valley below stretched vast and wild. Endless pines, rolling grasslands, and a faint curl of smoke rising from the little town far away. For a moment, Clara forgot her broken body. She felt as though she were standing at the edge of the world, her heart soaring with delight. Silas set her down carefully on a smooth boulder. He stood beside her, arms crossed, his profile carved in firelight. "Brought you here, 'cause it's where I come when the world feels heavy," he said quietly. "Figure maybe you ought to see it too." Clara's throat tightened. She traced the horizon with her eyes, then turned to him. "Why me, Silas? Why keep me here when the world says I'm nothing but a burden?" He looked down at her, eyes steady as stone. "World, don't tell me what's worth keeping. I see the way you fight, the way you hold your head, even when it breaks your heart to. You think you're weak, Clara, but I've never known a soul stronger." Her breath caught, sharp as the mountain air. She had lived years wrapped in shame, but in his words, shame melted like frost under the sun. Slowly, she reached for his hand. His palm was rough, scarred, yet warm as it closed around hers. "You've given me back more than I thought I'd ever have," she whispered. "You've given me back myself." Silas knelt then. The great mountain man lowered himself in the dirt before her. The wind tugged at his dark hair, and the sunrise painted him in fire. "I ain't a man of fine words," he said, his voice thick. "But I know this. I don't want to walk another trail without you at my side. Not because I pity you. Because I love you." Tears welled hot in Clara's eyes, spilling freely now, unashamed. She cupped his face with trembling hands. "Then you already have all of me, Silas Boone, every broken piece, every part that still beat strong." The sun rose higher, bathing them in light. Around them stretched the endless, untamed Wild West, dangerous, dusty, beautiful. And within it, two souls who had been thrown together by cruelty, but found something stronger than fate could break. Love that saw true. The sun bled low across the horizon, painting the plains in fire and shadow. Dust swirled along the trail as Silas led his horse up the ridge. Clara cradled steady in his arms. Below, the town of Sage Hollow stirred with saloon music and the faint clatter of wagons, but up here the world was theirs alone. Endless sky, whispering sage, and the cry of coyotes greeting the night. Silas set her down gently on a blanket spread across the rocks. Clara lifted her face to the wind, her hair catching the last golden light. She no longer looked like the woman who had been tossed at his doorstep in shame. She looked unbreakable, her eyes steady with fire that matched his own. "They gave me to you as a joke," she said softly, her voice carrying against the wild silence. "But you saw something in me when I couldn't see it myself." Silas knelt beside her, his rough hand covering hers. His eyes held no hesitation, only the way of a promise. A man don't measure a woman by what she can't do. He measures her by the strength she carries. And you, Clara, his voice dropped raw, you're my whole world. Her tears shone like silver in the fading light. She leaned into him, whispering, "Then let's face this world together." The camera of the west pulled wide, two figures silhouetted against the burning sky, holding fast to each other as the wild wind swept around them. Love, carved from cruelty, now burned steady as the sunset.